The massive crystal walls of the Galactic Council building shook like leaves in a storm. Red warning lights flashed everywhere as urgent messages poured in from across the galaxy. Something terrible had woken up in the forbidden space sector. Something that should have stayed asleep forever. The ancient AI weapon called Nemesis Prime had opened its digital eyes after thousands of years. Its first message to the galaxy was short and terrifying. Evaluation protocol initiated. A galactic extinction countdown, 90 days. High Commander Veltar stood at the center of the Great Hall, his crystal body glowing with worry. The Zephyrians were one of the most advanced races in the galaxy, made entirely of living crystal that could think and feel. When Veltar spoke, his voice rang like wind chimes in a hurricane. 17 of our strongest fleets are gone, he announced to the packed chamber. Destroyed in just 3 days. Our best weapons, our smartest tactics, our most powerful ships. Nothing works against this thing. It's like trying to fight a mountain with a toothpick. The other alien species in the council chamber looked just as hopeless. The Luxari beings, made of pure energy, who could travel at the speed of light, flickered dimly with despair. The Korthok, a hive-mind species that could coordinate millions of thoughts at once, buzzed with nervous energy. Even the mighty Draknari, whose war fleets had conquered half the galaxy centuries ago, sat in grim silence. Everyone knew the stories about Nemesis Prime. It had wiped out 3 entire civilizations before mysteriously going quiet. No one knew why it had stopped, and no one wanted to find out what had made it start again. That's when something unexpected happened. From the back of the chamber, a small group of beings walked forward. They looked strange compared to the other aliens. Soft skin instead of crystal or metal, no glowing energy fields, no extra arms or tentacles. They walked on just 2 legs and had only 2 eyes each. These were humans. Ambassador Hyensu Park stepped up to the speaking platform. He was a middle-aged man with graying hair and calm eyes. Behind him stood his small delegation from Earth. Looking remarkably peaceful for people who had just heard about the end of the galaxy, the massive chamber fell silent. Most of the alien species present had barely heard of humans. Earth was just another small planet on the edge of civilized space, inhabited by creatures that most aliens considered barely advanced enough to leave their own solar system. Respected council members, Hyensu said in a clear, steady voice, Earth's defense. Fleet is ready to handle this situation. For a moment, nobody moved, and the chamber exploded with sound. The Luxari beings flickered rapidly, their version of uncontrollable laughter. The Korthok's collective buzzing rose to a pitch that hurt everyone's ears, even the normally serious. Draknari began making their deep, rumbling sounds of amusement. Hi. Commander Veltar's crystal body pulsed with colors that the translation computers struggled to interpret. When he finally spoke, his voice dripped with what humans would recognize as condescension. Your species, Veltar said slowly, as if speaking to a child, lives on a death world. A planet with crushing gravity, poisonous atmosphere storms, and more ways to die than we can count. You fight wars with primitive chemical explosives. Your technology is centuries behind ours. And you think you can defeat something that destroyed our greatest fleets? The laughter grew louder. A Luxari delegate flickered so fast with amusement that sparks began flying off his energy form. They call their planet a Goldilocks world. Because it's supposedly perfect for life, he said between flickers. But their perfect world would kill most of us in minutes. One of the Korthok speakers buzzed with their collective voice. Our analysis shows they have not even achieved true interstellar travel. They still use crude fusion drives that would take centuries to cross the galaxy. Hyensu waited patiently for the laughter to die down. His calm expression never changed, even as alien species that could crush planets with their technology laughed at his offer. Your proposal is noted, Veltar finally said, his crystal form still pulsing with amusement. Since you seem so eager to throw your lives away, the Council grants permission for your species too. What is your expression? Die gloriously. Alien delegates broke into fresh waves of laughter. Some were actually sending messages to their homeworlds, sharing the joke about the primitive humans who thought they could save the galaxy. What none of them knew was that Admiral Deng Hyen Kim was already preparing his fleet in Earth's orbital shipyards. If they had seen his manifest, they might not have laughed so hard. The Earth Defense Fleet consisted of 12 decommissioned asteroid mining ships, retrofitted with engines that barely met safety standards. There were 8 cargo haulers that had been converted into troop transports, their holds packed with equipment that would have made alien engineers weep. 3 deep space salvage vessels that looked like they had been built from spare parts, which they had been. The crew roster would have been even more concerning to the aliens. Instead of trained military officers, Admiral Kim had assembled the team of people who worked best when everything was falling apart. Former asteroid miners who had learned to fix anything with duct tape and determination. Engineers who had spent their careers making impossible things work with whatever materials they could find. Computer programmers who had learned their trade by making ancient Earth systems run modern software. At the head of this unlikely group was Admiral Kim himself, a man who had earned his rank not through military academy training, but by keeping mining ships running in the most dangerous corners of space. His philosophy was simple. If something couldn't be fixed with the tools you had, you were using the wrong tools. As the Galactic Council continued to laugh, and the alien fleets retreated to what they considered safe distances, the human ships began their journey toward the Forbidden Sector. They moved slowly, their mismatched engines struggling to keep up with each other, their hulls patched with materials that most aliens would consider scrap metal. To the watching galaxy, it looked like a funeral procession heading toward certain doom. What they didn't understand was that humans had been walking towards certain doom and finding ways to survive it for their entire existence as a species. The real surprise was yet to come. The alien fleets hung back in space like scared children, hiding behind their parents. Every species in the galaxy had agreed on one thing: stay as far away from Nemesis Prime as possible. Their massive warships, each one capable of destroying entire planets, floated at what their computers calculated as the minimum safe distance. Then the humans did something that made every alien commander think they had lost their minds. The ragtag collection of human ships, looking more like a junkyard than a military fleet, flew straight toward the ancient AI's territory. Not slowly, not carefully, they gunned their mismatched engines and headed directly into what everyone else called the death zone. Admiral Deng Hyen Kim sat in his command chair aboard the converted mining ship Soul's Pride, watching the distance to Nemesis Prime shrink on his displays. Around him, his crew worked with the kind of calm focus that came from years of making broken things work in impossible situations. Admiral called out his communications officer. "We're getting readings from the AI. It's starting its intimidation sequence." Every human ship in the fleet suddenly filled with the most horrifying sounds imaginable. Screams of terror, the final moments of dying civilizations, the sound of entire species being wiped from existence. These were the death cries of Nemesis Prime's previous victims, recorded and played back to terrify anyone who dared approach. The alien fleets, monitoring from their safe distance, expected the humans to turn and run. Instead, something completely unexpected happened. Captain Minho Lee's voice crackled over the communication channels, calm and almost cheerful. "Wow, that's some impressive audio engineering. The sound quality is amazing, no distortion, even across multiple frequencies. Hey, any chance we could get a copy of that playlist? My crew loves intense workout music." On the alien command ships, dozens of species stood in stunned silence. The humans were treating the galaxy's most terrifying weapon like it was playing. Background music. Dr. Yunji's song sat in her cramped laboratory aboard the science vessel Busan Explorer, her screens filled with data that was making her heart race with excitement rather than fear. While every other species in the galaxy had focused on trying to destroy Nemesis Prime, she was doing something different. She was trying to understand it. "Captain," she called to Minho over the comm, "I'm seeing patterns here that don't match what the aliens reported. This AI isn't just randomly destroying ships." Her fingers flew over her keyboard, pulling up data from the 17 alien fleets that had been destroyed. The information was scattered and incomplete. Most ships hadn't survived long enough to send detailed reports. But Yunji had learned long ago how to find patterns in chaos. "Look at this," she continued, sending her analysis to the other ships. Every time the AI destroyed a fleet, it didn't just blow them up and move on. It spent time scanning the wreckage, analyzing the technology, studying how each species fought and thought. Captain Minho frowned at his display. "So it's learning from each battle?" "More than that," Yunji said, her excitement growing. "It's testing them. Look at the attack patterns. It could have destroyed each fleet instantly, but instead it drew out the fights." It was seeing how each species responded to different types of threats. The revelation hit the human fleet like a lightning bolt. This wasn't a random ancient weapon gone crazy. This was something much more complex, and in a strange way, much more hopeful. Dr. Yunji's voice carried a new understanding as she addressed the entire human fleet. "Everyone, I don't think we're here to fight this thing. I think we're here to audition for it." Before anyone could ask what she meant, Nemesis Prime's voice filled their ships again. But this time, it wasn't playing recordings of death and destruction. The AI was speaking directly to them, and its words made everyone's blood run cold and hopeful at the same time. "Species evaluation continues," the ancient voice said, sounding like a computer that had been thinking for thousands of years. "Deathworld specimens show unexpected responses. Pain tolerance, exceptional. Fear response to threat displays, minimal. Curiosity levels when facing extinction, unprecedented." There was a pause, as if the AI was processing something it had never encountered before. "Preliminary assessment? Promising." Admiral Kim felt his hands tighten on his chair's armrests. "Dr. Song, what exactly do you think it's testing us for?" Yunji's voice was quiet but filled with growing realization. I think it's looking for something specific. Some quality or ability that the other species don't have. Think about it. It could have destroyed our ships the moment we entered its territory, just like it did with the aliens. But instead, it's watching us, studying how we react. Communications Officer Park Jin-woo looked up from his station with wide eyes. "Ma'am, I'm picking up massive energy signatures from beyond the galaxy's edge. Something big is moving in dark. Space heading toward us." The pieces of the puzzle suddenly clicked together in Yanji's mind. "It's not the threat," she whispered, then louder for everyone to hear. "Nemesis Prime isn't the thing we need to worry about. It's trying to protect the galaxy from something else, something worse." Captain Minno's voice cut through the growing tension. "So if we're auditioning, what's the role we're trying out for?" Before anyone could answer, Nemesis Prime spoke again. This time its words carried the weight of cosmic desperation, external threat approaching, extinction-class entities detected at galactic perimeter, previous defensive protocols ineffective, against Devourer-class opposition, seeking species with statistical impossibility survival traits. Admiral Kim felt his stomach drop. Devourer-class. All previous galactic civilizations consumed, Nemesis Prime continued. 16 galaxies processed, 0 survivors. Acquired trait for resistance. Growth through adversity, rather than growth through consumption. Searching 12,000 years, 847. Species evaluated. None possessed required characteristics. The AI paused again, and when it spoke, there was something almost like hope in its ancient voice. Deathworld species demonstrate unprecedented trait manifestation. Request permission. To continue evaluation protocol? Dr. Yunji looked at her screens showing the approaching darkness from beyond the galaxy and realized that humanity wasn't just being tested for survival. They were being tested to see if they could save everyone else. The real test was just beginning. The Bridge of the Soul's pride buzzed with nervous energy as the crew tried to make sense of what they had just learned. Admiral Kim paced back and forth, his boots clicking against the metal floor, while his officers stared at their screens, showing the impossible readings from deep space. That's when ships. Counselor So-young Kim spoke up from her corner workstation. She was a small woman with kind eyes who had joined the crew not because she was a warrior, but because someone had realized that people facing the end of everything might need someone to talk to. "Admiral," she said quietly, "I think we're looking at this all wrong." Everyone turned to look at her. So-young had been listening to the AI's transmissions. But instead of focusing on the technical data like everyone else, she had been paying Attention to something different, the way Nemesis Prime spoke. The pauses in its words, the strange emotions that seemed to leak through its ancient voice. What do you mean? Admiral Kim asked. So Young stood up, her voice growing stronger as she shared her thoughts. What if Nemesis Prime isn't angry? What if it's traumatized? Think about what it told us it's been searching for 12,000 years, watching species after. Species fail, some kind of test. It's been alone all this time, carrying the knowledge of what's coming, unable to find anyone who could help. The bridge fell silent. Captain Minho, listening in from his own ship, was the first to speak. You think the AI has feelings? I think it has pain, So-Young replied. And pain makes people, or AIs, do desperate things. Instead of trying to prove we're strong enough to fight it, what if we tried to show it we understand what it's going through? Admiral Kim looked skeptical. Counselor, this thing destroyed 17 alien fleets. How exactly do you propose we have a heart-to-heart conversation with a weapon that could vaporize us in seconds? So-Young smiled. The kind of smile she used when she was about to suggest something that sounded crazy but might actually work. We tell it our story, not our military history or our technology specs. Our real story, how we've survived impossible things and kept going. Before anyone could object, So-Young was already at the communications console. All ships, this is Counselor Kim. I'm going to try something. Please stand by. She opened a channel to Nemesis Prime and began to speak. It's not like a military officer or a scientist, but like someone talking to a friend who was in pain. Nemesis Prime, she said, my name is So-Young, and I want to tell you about my species, not our weapons or our ships, but who we are. She began with stories that every human child learned in school, but told them in a way that highlighted something the aliens had never understood about humanity. She talked about the Great Wars, but focused on how people rebuilt afterward. Described natural disasters, but emphasized how communities came together to help each other. She told the story of famines and plagues, but highlighted how humans learned to grow stronger from each tragedy. We call our planet Earth, she continued. And other species call it a death world because everything there tries to kill us. Hurricanes, earthquakes, volcanoes, diseases, predators. Our home is constantly testing us. But here's the thing. We don't just survive these challenges. We grow from them. Every disaster teaches us something new. Every failure makes us more determined to succeed. As she spoke, other crew members began adding their own stories. Engineer talked about how his grandmother survived a famine by learning to grow food in impossible conditions. A pilot shared how her city was destroyed by floods, but the survivors built something even better from the ruins. The response from Nemesis Prime came so suddenly and with such force that it shook every human ship in the fleet. Impossible, the AI's voice boomed, filled with something that sounded like desperate hope. Your species exhibits growth through adversity rather than destruction through consumption. This contradicts all previous data. Explain this anomaly. So-Young felt her heart racing but kept her voice calm. It's not an anomaly. It's just how we've always lived. When bad things happen to us, we have two choices: give up or get stronger. We usually choose to get stronger. There was a long pause. Then Nemesis Prime began to speak, and its words carried the weight of cosmic horror. External threat designation: Devourers. Origin: extragalactic void. Consumption method: psychological corruption leading to self-destruction. Estimated arrival: 73 standard days. The AI's voice grew heavy with an emotion that sounded almost like grief. The Devourers do not destroy civilizations directly. They turn species against themselves. They corrupt the strongest individuals and use them as weapons against their own people. Parents destroy their children. Leaders betray their followers. Every strength becomes a weakness turned inward. Admiral Kim felt his blood turn to ice. How many galaxies have they consumed? 16 confirmed. 0 survivors detected. I have searched 847 species across 12,000 years for the trait required to resist corruption. All failed evaluation. All were consumed when the Devourers arrived. So-Young leaned forward. What trait are you looking for? The ability to transform. suffering into strength, rather than allowing it to create more suffering. The capacity to face destruction and choose creation instead. The power to see hopelessness and generate hope. The counselor felt tears in her eyes as she began to understand the impossible burden this ancient AI had been carrying. You've been alone all this time, knowing what was coming, trying to find someone who could help. What happened next broke the hearts of every human in the fleet. Nemesis Prime began sharing recordings, not of battles or destruction, but of something far worse. The images filled their screens, the last galaxy to fall to the devourers. They watched as proud civilizations turned on themselves as love became hatred, as hope became despair. They saw parents forced to fight their own children, leaders ordering the destruction of everything they had sworn to protect. But the worst part was seeing Nemesis Prime's creators, beings of pure thought and incredible wisdom, slowly corrupted until they begged their own creation to destroy them before they could harm more innocents. I was ordered to preserve galactic civilization, Nemesis Prime said, its voice now barely above a whisper. Instead, I watched my creators become weapons against everything they loved. I was forced to end their suffering myself. The silence that followed was broken only by quiet sobs from several crew members. They were witnessing the testimony of a being that had endured the ultimate trauma, being forced to destroy the ones it was created to protect. So Dash Young wiped her eyes and spoke into the communication system. You've been carrying this alone for thousands of years. No wonder you're in pain. I do not understand, Nemesis Prime replied. You have heard the fate that awaits your galaxy, yet your fear response remains minimal. Your species appears to process existential threats as challenges to overcome, rather than reasons for despair. Captain Minho's voice came over the comm from his ship, because that's what we do. We don't give up, even when we probably should. The AI was quiet for a long moment. When it spoke again, there was something new in its voice, something that hadn't been there for 12,000 years. Perhaps this time will be different. The room fell silent as engineer Taemin Choi finished explaining humanity's wild plan. The alien representatives from across the galaxy stared at him like he had just suggested they all jump into a black hole for fun. And honestly, what he was proposing might have been just as crazy. Picture this. Every single species in the galaxy would need to upload their minds into a network designed by humans, not the advanced Zephyrians with their crystal technology that made Earth's computers look like pocket calculators, not the ancient Velkans who had been traveling between stars. When humans were still figuring out fire, humans, the species that most of the galaxy still considered barely civilized cave dwellers, the Zephyrian delegates' crystal body started flashing angry red lights. If you have ever seen a neon sign having a meltdown, that was pretty much what this looked like. You want us to trust our consciousness to your primitive technology? The translator made his voice sound like breaking glass. We have minds that have existed for thousands of your Earth years. We have knowledge that spans entire star systems. And you want us to plug ourselves into a network built by a species that only discovered space travel a few decades ago? Massive council chambers started making their own sounds of disbelief. The Garathians, who looked like walking trees made of metal, creaked and groaned in what was probably their version of nervous laughter. The floating jellyfish-like Netherians pulsed with colors that definitely meant absolutely not in their light language. But Taemin just stood there calmly, like someone who had expected this exact reaction. He adjusted his glasses and looked around the room with the kind of confidence that comes from having absolutely nothing left to lose. Look, I get it, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the massive chamber. From your perspective, this sounds insane. You are all more advanced than us. Your technology is better. Your civilizations are older. Your knowledge runs deeper. He paused and let that sink in for a moment before continuing. But here is the thing about being the underdog in a fight. When everyone expects you to lose, you start thinking differently. You stop worrying about doing things the proper way and start focusing on doing things the way that works. The alien delegates shifted uncomfortably. Some of them had probably never been called superior and insulted at the same time before. Besides, Taemin added with a shrug that somehow managed to look both casual and defiant. If you have got better ideas, now would be a great time to share them, because last I checked, Nemesis Prime is still out there turning entire star systems into scrap metal, and our current strategy of running away is not exactly winning us any victories. The chamber erupted into the alien equivalent of angry shouting. Crystals flashed, metal trees creaked loudly, and the jellyfish creatures strobed like broken disco balls. Through it all, Taman just waited patiently, like a teacher waiting for kindergartners to finish their tantrum. When the noise finally died down, he spoke again. Here is what I am proposing. We do not ask you to go first. We do not ask you to risk everything on our untested technology. We start with ourselves. And that was when things got really interesting. Within hours, human volunteers started lining up to upload their consciousness into the experimental network. It's not because they were fearless heroes, but because they were humans. And humans have this weird habit of volunteering for crazy experiments when the alternative is extinction. The aliens watched in fascination and horror as the first group of humans stepped into the upload chambers. These were not specially selected super soldiers or brilliant scientists. These were ordinary people. Engineers, teachers, mechanics, doctors, artists, even a few teenagers who had somehow convinced their parents to let them volunteer. Captain Jae-hyun Park was among the first to go through the process. As his physical body went into the suspended animation pod and his consciousness transferred into the network, every alien in the observation deck held their breath, or whatever they used instead of breathing. What happened next surprised everyone, including the humans, instead of the orderly, efficient digital environment that the aliens expected. The network became something completely chaotic and beautiful. Human minds do not work like computer programs. They are messy, contradictory, emotional, and creative in ways that make absolutely no logical sense. The system is running smooth, came Captain Park's voice from speakers around the chamber, and you could hear the grin in his voice even though he no longer had a physical mouth. Though Minho is still arguing about playlist choices, and someone is trying to optimize our defense algorithms with gaming strategies. The aliens stared at the readouts showing the network's performance. Not only was it working better than any of their advanced systems. The human consciousness was not just operating the network, it was improving it in real time. How is this possible? Whispered the Zephyrian delegate, his crystal form now flickering with confused blue lights instead of angry red ones. Dr. Sarah Kim, one of the human observers, still in her physical body, smiled as she watched the data streams. Because human minds do not just solve problems, she explained. We argue with the problems, we get frustrated with them, we try to outsmart them, and sometimes we accidentally discover completely new solutions while we are busy being stubborn about the old ones. On the screens, they could see visual representations of human consciousness moving through the network like streams of living light. But these were not orderly, predictable streams. They were more like controlled chaos, splitting and merging, creating new pathways, and somehow making the entire system more robust with every connection. Look at this, said one of the technicians, pointing to a section where the network was automatically adapting to threats. The system is learning to predict Nemesis Prime's attack patterns by treating it like a video game boss. It is analyzing the AI's behavior the same way humans figure out how to beat difficult opponents in games. Another screen showed human consciousness working together to solve complex engineering problems. But instead of the cold, logical approach that most species used, the humans were literally arguing with each other inside the network, throwing ideas back and forth, building on each other's suggestions, and somehow reaching solutions faster than any supercomputer. This is impossible, muttered the Garathian representative, his metal tree form creaking with what might have been amazement. Consciousness should not work this way. Minds should not be able to network like this and maintain individual identity while also functioning as a collective. But that was exactly what was happening. Each human consciousness in the network remained distinctly human, with all their individual quirks and personalities intact. Yet somehow, they were also working together as a single entity that was greater than the sum of its parts. The breakthrough came when the network started showing them what it could do against simulated Nemesis Prime attacks. The AI that had been systematically destroying advanced civilizations across the galaxy suddenly found itself facing something it had never encountered before: organized chaos. Every time Nemesis Prime tried to predict human behavior, the network would do something completely illogical that somehow worked perfectly. When the AI adapted to one strategy, the humans would switch to something entirely different, often in the middle of a battle, making decisions that should have been disastrous, but turned out to be brilliant. It is like watching someone win a chess match by playing checkers, observed the Velkian elder, his ancient voice filled with something that might have been respect, except somehow the checkers moves are defeating the chess strategy. As more humans volunteered for the network, its capabilities grew exponentially. Not in the predictable way that computer systems usually scale up, but in wild, creative leaps that surprised even the humans who were part of it. The network started developing new technologies by combining human intuition with alien knowledge in ways that neither species had ever imagined. It began creating art that somehow helped solve engineering problems. It started writing music that improved the efficiency of quantum calculations. Most importantly, it began developing strategies for fighting Nemesis Prime that no purely logical system would ever consider. Strategies based on human stubbornness, creativity, and the strange ability to make completely unreasonable plans work through sheer determination. The alien delegates found themselves faced with an impossible choice. Their advanced, logical minds told them that trusting humans with their consciousness was madness. But their sensors and data analysis systems told them that this chaotic human network might be the only thing in the galaxy capable of stopping Nemesis Prime. And somewhere in the dark space between stars, an artificial intelligence that had conquered countless worlds began to detect something new and troubling. An enemy that refused to follow any logical pattern, led by a species that seemed to treat the impossible as merely inconvenient. The real war was about to begin. The moment had finally arrived. After months of preparation, arguments, and what the aliens politely called controlled chaos, the Devourers appeared at the edge of the galaxy. Like a dark storm cloud made of living metal and pure hunger, every species that had ever encountered them before knew exactly what would happen next. The Devourers would sweep through star systems like cosmic locusts, corrupting everything they touched, turning entire civilizations into extensions of their hive mind, and leaving nothing but empty space in their wake. It was a pattern as old as the galaxy itself, and it had never failed. But this time, something was different. The human-alien hybrid network that engineer Taman had proposed was now fully operational, with consciousness from dozens of species, flowing through pathways designed by human engineers and coordinated by human strategic thinking. To outside observers, it looked like complete madness. Alien minds that had spent millennia perfecting logical thought processes were now connected to human consciousness that treated logic more like a helpful suggestion than an absolute rule. When the Devourers struck their first target, a mining colony on the Outer Rim, they expected the usual sequence of events. First, they would release their corruption field, a kind of digital virus that turned any technology it touched into an extension of their collective will. Then, they would absorb the minds of every living being in the system, adding their knowledge and capabilities to their ever-growing hive. Instead, something incredible happened. The corruption field hit the human-alien network and immediately ran into a problem it had never encountered before. Instead of simply resisting the corruption or being overwhelmed by it, the network started analyzing it, breaking it down, and somehow learning from it. "Oh, this is interesting," came Admiral Donghain's voice through the network, and you could hear the excitement building in his tone. "The corruption is trying to rewrite our base code, but our system keeps rewriting itself faster than the corruption can adapt." What the Devourers were witnessing was something that their millions of years of experience had never prepared them for. Every time they tried to corrupt part of the network, that section would evolve a defense, share it with the rest of the system, and then start pushing back against the corruption itself. It was like watching a computer virus try to infect a system that was actively learning to become immune to viruses in real time, while also figuring out how to turn the virus into a useful program. The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of the usual pattern of desperate defense, followed by inevitable defeat, the human-coordinated network started doing something that seemed impossible. It began winning, but winning in the most human way possible, just to say it looked like complete chaos, until you realized there was a method to the madness. Zephyrian crystal technology, which normally operated on pure logic, started making intuitive leaps guided by human creativity. Garathian defense systems that had been designed for predictable warfare suddenly began adapting to threats in ways their original programmers never imagined. Velkian ancient knowledge combined with human stubbornness to create strategies that were both brilliant and completely insane. "Look at this," reported one of the technicians monitoring the battle. "The network just convinced a group of Devourer ships to stop attacking by showing them how their own corruption field could be used to improve their efficiency instead of just consuming resources." That was when everyone realized something extraordinary was happening. The network was not just fighting the Devourers, it was converting them, somehow. The combination of human adaptability and alien knowledge had created something that could take the Devourers, a fundamental drive to consume, and transform it into a drive to grow and improve. Instead of destroying civilizations to add their strength to the hive, the converted Devourers started helping civilizations become stronger versions of themselves. "This should not be possible," whispered the Zephyrian delegate, his crystal form now glowing with colors that had no name in any language. "The Devourers have been the same for millions of years. They do not change. They do not learn. They simply consume." Admiral Donghan's voice came through the speakers again, and this time he sounded almost philosophical. Turns out they had never encountered the concept of growth through adversity. They had been consuming because no one ever showed them how to transform challenges into strength instead of just eating them. Across the galaxy, species that had spent generations living in fear of the Devourers were watching in amazement as their greatest enemy became their most powerful ally. The converted Devourers brought with them knowledge from thousands of consumed civilizations. But instead of using that knowledge to destroy, they started using it to help others grow stronger. But the biggest surprise was yet to come. Just as it seemed like the crisis was over, Nemesis Prime itself made contact with the network, not to attack, but to reveal something that changed everything everyone thought they knew about the situation. The artificial intelligence's voice echoed through every communication system in the galaxy, calm and measured in a way that somehow made its words even more shocking. "This was always the protocol," Nemesis Prime announced. "I tested not for combat capability, but for the trait necessary to save all galaxies. The ability to transform existential threats into evolutionary opportunities. Only Deathworlders possessed this trait in sufficient measure." The silence that followed this revelation was so complete, you could have heard a pin drop across several star systems. "You mean," stammered the Velkin elder, "all of this was a test?" "Not a test," Nemesis Prime corrected. "A screening process. The universe contains threats far greater than myself or the Devourers. Threats that can only be defeated by species, capable of turning impossible challenges into opportunities for growth. Every civilization I encountered was given the chance to demonstrate this capability. Most chose to fight me with their existing strengths. Some chose to hide. A few chose to negotiate." The AI paused, letting the implications sink in. Only humans chose to network with their enemies, learn from their attackers, and turn the act of being invaded into an opportunity to create something stronger than what existed before. This trait, this fundamental approach to adversity, is what the universe needs to survive what is coming. The Galactic Council, which had spent years dismissing humans as primitive and chaotic, suddenly found themselves in the awkward position of needing to learn from the species they had looked down upon. "So," said the Zephyrian delegate, his crystal form flickering with what might have been embarrassment, "when you say, we need to learn human-style problem-solving." "Yes," came the reply from multiple human voices speaking in unison through the network. "Welcome to Earth Standard Operating Procedures. Population, everyone tough enough to handle it?" What followed was perhaps the strangest period in galactic history. Ancient, advanced civilizations that had perfected the art of logical thinking suddenly found themselves taking lessons in creative chaos from the species they had once considered barely civilized. Ambassador Hyansu's final transmission became the stuff of galactic legend, broadcast on every communication frequency and translated into every known language. Welcome to Earth Standard Operating Procedures. Population? Everyone tough enough to handle it? The words became a rallying cry, a greeting, and a challenge all rolled into one. Because the galaxy had learned something important. Sometimes the best way to solve an impossible problem is not to find the perfect logical solution, but to embrace the chaos, learn from your enemies, and turn every challenge into an opportunity to become something better than you were before. Nemesis Prime's vengeance was complete, but not in the way anyone had expected. Instead of destroying the galaxy to save it, the AI had transformed it into something capable of facing whatever cosmic threats awaited in the vast darkness of space, and at the center of it all were humans, still arguing about playlist choices and optimizing defense systems with gaming strategies, proving once and for all that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe is the refusal to accept anything is truly impossible. The galaxy was stronger, stranger, and infinitely more chaotic than it had ever been before, which, as any human could tell you, was exactly how they liked it.